Hey, hey, hey! Welcome to my cozy corner of the internet. This is Nephilim VA bringing you the 7th chapter of Inheritance written by A is for Amy 71 on AO3. It seems that Izuku isn't having much luck when it comes to his quirks. Poor thing. This fanfiction is for mature audiences with canon-typical violence and a trigger warning for major character death. If that isn't your style, then I recommend Shades of Green, which is written by Maybe It's Friendly on AO3. It can be found on my channel! Canon Divergence is the name of the game and indulges the what-ifs of Midoriya Izuku having a quirk. With that being said, the chapter summary is as followed. Granny Ito finally confesses what she's been doing all this time, and it's decided that Izuku needs more help than anyone realized. Now I implore you to sit back and relax whilst I read to you. Chapter 7. Izuku didn't make it home before his dad. In fact, his dad had come to pick them up from the Koban and bring Izuku a backpack full of books for him to wear for the time being. His dad had been worried and surprised and maybe a bit exasperated, but not angry. Izuku loved that about his dad. He had simply shown up and picked Izuku up and saw Granny Ito to the station so she could catch her train home. The police had given them a whole bunch of pamphlets that Dad promised to look at, and then they'd gone home and had leftovers for dinner. Izuku's teachers had been very understanding about him having to wear a backpack all day, and the kids didn't make fun of him too much either. Almost everyone had trouble with their quirk at one time or another, and Izuku's case was especially trying. His father made appointments for him with a quirk counsellor and a personal trainer who specialized in helping kids get a handle on their quirks. Izuku was pretty much the trainer's oldest new client, but he really enjoyed the sessions. Within weeks, he was able to adequately control his levitation quirk, and his balancing quirk had helped to keep him safe as well. Soon he was performing simple tricks like levitating to the top of a pole and balancing there like a seasoned acrobat, doing trick moves for fun. His trainer suggested that he be signed up for gymnastics to hone his skill and give him better control, should his levitation quirk fail him and he needed to rely on his balance to land well. His father agreed, and Izuku was enrolled in a class after school most days. The counsellor was concerned over the mental strain of having to adapt to suddenly appearing quirks, and did her best to supply him with tools to deal with stress and make sure he knew the legality and ethical choices that each of his quirks entailed. Izuku liked the counsellor well enough, but was a remarkably well-adjusted boy for someone who had been through so much in a short life. He remained cheerful and optimistic and continued to focus on his hero worship and the desire to become a hero himself one day. He continued to keep notebooks on various heroes he saw on television or learned about in school or from his friends. He even kept one on himself and the possible applications of each of his quirks as it applied to everyday life and possible hero work in the future. Aside from the levitation quirk, he made it all the way through 4th grade without acquiring any new quirks, which was a relief to everyone. At the end of 3rd grade, he even met a man who had a similar quirk to his own that allowed him to collect quirks, though Izuku didn't really remember much about their meeting. Granny Ito was a reliable constant in his life. Though most days Izuku was busy from sun-up to sunset with school, gymnastics, and homework, she spent most of her time cleaning and doing housework and preparing meals for Izuku and his dad that didn't get eaten until they got home and heated them up. He only really saw her for a short time each day between getting home and his father showing up after work. Then one day, just before the end of 4th grade, something changed. Granny Ito was becoming more and more agitated, so much so that even Izuku's dad noticed it. It began after one of their field trips on a weekend to that hero store that Izuku adored, and got progressively worse over the course of the following week. Finally, Granny took a couple days off from work, and Izuku was left to manage his own schedule. He did fine and even cooked meals, thanks to all the lessons Granny had given him over the years, and was proud of himself, but he was worried. He'd never seen Granny like this. He certainly couldn't remember her ever asking for time off before. When Granny returned, she asked Izuku's dad if she could have a private meeting with him, and they disappeared into the kitchen. Izuku, being worried for Granny Ito, had snuck from his room and crawled through the house to listen in, hoping to find out what was bothering his beloved guardian. "I don't think I understand what you're telling me," Izuku heard his father say to Granny. Izuku was lying on his stomach on the carpet, his head just out of sight of the two seated at the kitchen table. I've been lying to you from the start," Granny said, her voice sounding shaky. "You see, there's a man that used to come to my family's restaurant, and he seemed very nice, always polite and appreciative, always got take-out food. One day he came to us and said that he wanted my daughter to take on a position as a housekeeper, looking after a little boy and his father. My daughter refused, saying that she intended to take over the family restaurant and didn't need another job." Izuku's dad was quiet for a moment. "He wanted your daughter to take the job looking after me and Izuku?" "Yes," Granny said. "He said that he would give her a quirk to make you trust her, and if she didn't, he'd destroy us." "Wait, gave her a quirk?" his dad asked. Izuku was more concerned with the "destroy us" part, and had to stop himself from jumping up and demanding to know more. "That's his quirk," she said, sounding fearful. "He can steal quirks from anyone, and he can give them to others if he wants. I stepped in and demanded to take her place, so she wouldn't be put in that situation or have to be away from her husband for so long." "Why did he want you to take the job here?" his dad asked, sounding very serious. "He's interested in Izuku's quirk," she said, beginning to weep a little. "Because he's been able to have multiple quirks without putting a strain on his body. That isn't supposed to be possible. 2 is usually the most a person can handle. He wants to know what's so special about Izuku, so he can duplicate it in his student. I don't know how they're related, but there's a boy named Tomura, and he's got a perfectly awful quirk. He disintegrates anything or anyone he touches with all 5 fingers. It's terrifying." "So he wanted you to spy on Izuku for him?" "Yes," Granny admitted, "but that's not all. He's been making me take Izuku to meet him since the beginning. All of the field trips we've gone on have been a distraction so Izuku and you wouldn't find out what's really been going on." Izuku stayed where he was, hidden out of sight, and tried to remember Granny ever taking him anywhere like that. He had brief flashes of being confused about falling asleep for so long on the train, but nothing about meeting anyone. "I don't know how he does it, but a few minutes after we leave from meeting him, Izuku completely forgets all about it. He's met him dozens of times and never remembers a thing," Granny said, sniffing loudly, her voice painfully wobbly. "I didn't want to take him, but he said he'd let Tomura do to my family what he did to our cat, if I didn't follow his instructions." "What exactly happened at these meetings?" his father asked, sounding grim. "Mostly he'd just talk to him, And sometimes he took blood samples, but I wasn't allowed to see what he was up to most of the time," she said, hiccuping out the words with difficulty. "Every time I objected, something would be a pile of ash or rubble or something dead and half dissolved when I got home that night, as a warning." "He took Izuku's blood?" Izuku's father sounded angry, angrier than Izuku had ever heard him sound before. The smell of hot ash drifted to Izuku's nose, and he knew his father must be smoking at the mouth again from his quirk. "Yes," Granny answered, barely audible. "Then one time he took Izuku and I to an apartment, and there was a woman there. A very sick woman." Izuku listened in horror as she told his father about a woman who had died while Izuku and she was watching. She described how Izuku had inherited her quirk right in front of their eyes, without either of them noticing until it was done. She told him about Shigaraki's theory that not only was Izuku collecting the quirks of people that died in close proximity, but would hasten their death if they were sick or weak enough that the end was very near. Izuku had trouble believing it. He didn't even remember anything like that. Granny wouldn't lie. But she had lied. A lot. Or was she lying now? Did she just say he'd killed someone? That couldn't be true. What made you decide to tell me about this now?" Izuku's dad asked, sounding shaken. "What's changed?" "Because he wants me to bring Izuku to him again," she said, stifling a sob. "In 2 weeks. I don't think he'll let me bring him back this time. He said my services would no longer be needed." For a little while, the only sound was Granny Ito crying, and Izuku wasn't sure what to do. He could see the smoke his father was emitting now, and wondered if the smoke alarm would sound because of it. "Izuku is like my own grandson," Granny said finally. "I may not have protected him before, but I won't let him be taken. If that means I have to pay the price for what I've done, then that's what will happen." Izuku couldn't stand it anymore. He jumped to his feet and ran into the room. "No, we can't let something bad happen to you," Izuku said, hands balled into fists at his side. "No, we can't," his father agreed. He said nothing about Izuku's apparent spying and eavesdropping. "These past 2 days I've talked to my daughter and her husband," Granny said sadly. "They've packed and gone on vacation for a while. I don't care what happens to the restaurant as long as they're safe." "What about you?" Izuku demanded. "Are you going away?" "Yes, Izuku. One way or another, I don't think I'll be coming back here again." Izuku couldn't help the tears that sprang up in his eyes. "We're going to do our best to keep you safe," his dad told her, taking out his phone. "We'll start by calling the police and see if we can't get some help that way. I'm ready to face whatever consequences need to be faced," Granny said firmly. "I'm angry, but not so angry I'd let you be killed over it," Izuku's dad said, finally getting his smoke under control. "You've been in an impossible situation, and I get that you were protecting your family. I just wish—" He didn't finish the thought as he dialed the police and tried to find who could handle a case like this. It took several phone calls, but within 2 hours there was a detective with a lie-detecting quirk and a policeman in their living room, asking all kinds of questions. Granny answered as best as she could, and the detective kept texting on his phone back and forth with someone the whole time.
There are some people I'd like to bring in on this case. This sounds like a villain we've known for quite some time," the detective finally said, tucking his phone in his pocket. "They should be here in a few minutes."
Izuku sat next to his father and answered questions from the detective, who was nice and treated Granny with respect and kindness, even when she kept saying that she didn't deserve it.
"Izuku-kun," the detective said kindly, "why don't you go out and wait for my friends to arrive? Officer Sansa will go with you. I need to talk to your dad and Ito-san in private, okay? You don't have to go anywhere but right outside the front door."
Izuku nodded and walked with the officer to the front door. He had a whole list of questions he wanted to ask the feline-headed man, starting with the bell around his neck. While he plied the officer with a million questions, he kept looking back at the apartment door, wondering what they were talking about. A little while later, Izuku heard heavy footsteps approaching on the stairs leading up to their apartment's floor. Izuku blinked as he saw golden hair spikes seeming to rise from the stairwell, followed by a man whose height alone gave him away. "Oh mate!" He wasn't wearing his hero gear, but his identity was unmistakable. The man let out the familiar trademark laugh as he spotted Izuku staring and Officer Sansa looking amused. "Hello there!" All Might boomed with a grin. "I'm looking for Detective Sukauchi." "He's inside, sir. Izuku-kun and I were just having a chat about quirks," Officer Sansa said. "Were you now?" All Might asked in a friendly, loud voice. Izuku managed to nod, even though he felt like he might pee his pants in excitement. Then he remembered why All Might was probably here.
"Please help Granny Ito. It's not her fault she lied."
"Don't worry, young man," All Might said, resting a hand on Izuku's curls, "because I am here." Izuku couldn't help but feel better hearing that simple catchphrase. There was another man behind All Might. He was tall, thin, and looked like a salaryman with a suit and tie and glasses and neatly combed hair. He didn't say anything, just followed along behind All Might like a shadow. Officer Sansa went ahead and opened the door, letting the two men in. Izuku crept in behind them, but was immediately sent to his room for a while, so the adults could discuss matters. There was no way to sneak out and listen, since the apartment was too small for him to go unnoticed by that many people in the living room. He went to his bed and sat with his handheld gaming console, but didn't turn on the game. His room was full of All Might merchandise, carefully saved up for over time and selected with painstaking care. Would All Might go and arrest that Shigaraki man and the kid? Could kids be arrested? Izuku sat contemplating what would happen if Granny Ito had to go away for a long time. Finally, there was a light knock on his door. He tried to leave his door open to try to hear, but they'd caught him. Scrambling off the bed, he opened the door to find the salaryman standing there. "May I come in?" the man asked. Izuku shrugged and stood back for the man to enter.
"You can sit in my desk chair if you want,"
Izuku offered, remembering his manners. "Thank you," the man said, doing so. "This is quite a remarkable All Might collection for someone your age."
"He's my favorite. I want to be a hero like him someday."
Nighteye pointed to a snow globe with a place of honor on the shelf with a limited edition All Might figure from a blind bag collection. "I have that same snow globe," he said. "There were 500 made."
"I won it in a raffle,"
Izuku said proudly. Izuku sat on the edge of his bed facing his visitor, wondering what he wanted. "Very lucky. My name is Sir Nighteye," the man told him. I'm All Might's sidekick. Izuku's eyes widened. He didn't know that All Might had a sidekick. What kind of fan was he? He had a million questions. I came to ask you if you would let me use my quirk on you, the man said calmly.
What's your quirk?
Izuku asked curiously. Good for you, the man approved. I'm glad you were smart enough to ask me before agreeing. My quirk is called foresight. It allows me to see into a person's future.
That's kind of...
Izuku began, then cut himself off before he could say something rude. Go on. Don't be afraid to say what you think.
It's kinda silly,
Izuku said apologetically.
Sorry.
The man smiled slightly. Why do you think it's silly?
Because no one knows what will happen in the future,
Izuku told him as if the answer was obvious.
Too many people have too many choices to predict the future. It's always changing.
Izuku thought he heard that in a movie or something. Interesting. How old are you again? Sir Nighteye didn't seem offended by Izuku's words. In fact, he sounded curious.
I'm almost 10,
Izuku said, even though his birthday was still 4 months away. I see, he said inscrutably. Well, I should say my quirk shows me the most probable outcome, then. It's just never been wrong before.
Wow, that's really impressive. Good job,
Izuku said excitedly. He was definitely going to put a page in his hero notebook about this. Thank you, Sir Nighteye said with a wry smile. I would like to try to see what might happen in your future, so we can figure out the best way to protect you.
Okay, I guess. Will you tell me what you see?
Izuku asked.
Am I gonna be a hero someday?
I probably won't look that far ahead, he said easily, and I'll only tell you something if you really, really need to know about it. Izuku sighed.
Do I have to do anything, or do I just sit here?
I have to touch you, like putting my hand on your hand or arm, and I have to make eye contact. All you have to do is sit still, he explained.
Okay.
Izuku held out his arm, and Sir Nighteye gently grasped his wrist and looked into Izuku's big green eyes. He sat like that for a couple minutes until Izuku started to feel squirmy. It didn't hurt, it didn't feel like anything. Sir Nighteye's eyes glowed an interesting purplish colour, and there was a strange pattern in the glow that kind of looked like a gear, which was neat. Izuku tried to memorize it so he could draw it later. After he was finished, Nighteye blinked and let go of Izuku's arms.
Did you see anything good?
Izuku asked, hoping for a hint. I see that you are a good person, Midoriya-kun, Nighteye told him, getting to his feet. And I think we'll be seeing more of each other in the future at some point. Other than that, I won't say. Izuku simply sighed and nodded.
Thank you for helping,
Izuku told him before the man turned toward the door. The man paused at the door and turned back to Izuku. Tell me a joke, the man said unexpectedly. Without hesitation, Izuku recited one of his favorites.
What's a villain's favorite part of a joke?
Sir Nighteye raised an eyebrow in inquiry.
The punch line,
Izuku told him with a grin. The man chuckled at that. I look forward to seeing you again one day, he said. He turned and left the room, making Izuku wonder if he was allowed to go out and find out what was going on. When he poked his head out and looked toward the living room, Officer Sansa spotted him and subtly shook his head. Izuku nodded and went back into his room, closing the door. He got out his latest notebook and began to painstakingly write about foresight. Thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate all the support you've given me. I love Sir Nighteye and his English voice actor. I am so happy that he has entered this story alongside All Might. A little life update to boost some spirits is that I am a step closer to getting physiotherapy, which will hopefully allow me to return to college soon. All credits goes to the original creator of this fanfiction, A is for Amy71 on AO3. I would highly appreciate it if you gave this video a like and you subscribe to the channel and you hit the notification bell to be notified of when I next upload. There is no pressure to do so though. Thank you for visiting my cozy corner of the internet. Keep growing my sunflowers. Mwah.